as we kick this off, this panel is talking about consumer-oriented trait introductions, and particularly our grower, our commodity expectations and perspectives. So if you would each like to introduce yourselves, and we'll start with Brad, and then go around and on to Justin. Yeah, you're.
That on?
Yep.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brad Erker. I'm Executive Director of Colorado Wheat. In Colorado, that means that I get to work with our checkoff group, our growers or like political group, and also our Wheat Research Foundation. So we operate all three of those organizations under the umbrella. They're actually three separate organizations, but we call all three of them collectively Colorado Wheat.
My name is Ron Suppes. Shirley, my wife, is sitting here in the front of the room. We farm in western Kansas, about equal distance from Colorado, Oklahoma, and Nebraska. Farm about 12,000 acres. I won't go through all of that. That's why I gave you a copy of my only slide. It's hard copy. So I've been involved with Kansas wheat probably since 2003. I've also been involved with U.S. Wheat and the Wheat Foods Council, and each time my term comes up to expire, I have to decide whether I want to do this again, and each time I look at what you people are doing and what our researchers are doing and decide that I need to stay involved and learn as much as I can, so I re-up. I did notice that yesterday your foot soldiers, Gary Milishasky and Chris Tanner. Gary Milishasky is with the U.S. Wheat from Kansas, and Chris Tanner, I believe, is going through the chairs with the National Association of Wheat Growers. I see that they were with Secretary Rollins in Southwest Kansas. So, and I'm sure they were talking about wheat, so just rest assured that we're on your side as farmers, and we're going to carry the weight with you. Justin.
All right, so hopefully everybody can hear me okay. My name's Justin Gilpin. I serve as CEO for the Kansas Wheat Commission, Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Look forward to participating in this panel. There's several things that I think is going to be important to talk about when we look back at some of the past history of trying to bring traits to marketplace or trying to add value across the value chain and trying to learn from past examples and of what has worked and what hasn't worked, I think is going to be important. I've spent some time of my career on the other side of the table as a mill buyer with General Mills, and then in this position now as one of Brad's colleagues for going on 15 years. So appreciate being with you.
All right, thank you. So I'd like to start by asking you if you could briefly explain a couple of the specific trait that you have worked with that, because I know there's several we could talk about here. What trait have you worked with your organization or your farm to deploy?
So there's a trait that we've worked with at Colorado Wheat for about 15 years. We have an identity preserved grain program built around it. We call it the Ardent Mills Colorado Wheat Research Foundation Ultra Grain Program, and it's centered around the BX7OE gene, and I think many breeders are aware of the gene now and utilize it in their programs, but our previous wheat breeder, Dr. Scott Haley, who was at CSU for about 20 years, starting in about 1999, he came upon this trait and released a variety in about 2009, I believe, called Snowmass. And I was working for the Colorado Seed Growers Association at the time, so I was not with Colorado Wheat when this program was developed. Around it, my predecessor, Daryl Hanovan, was the one who put this program together with Colorado State and with Ardent Mills. But the story that I recall hearing was that at first he didn't know what to do with a variety like this because it had very strong dough mixing characteristics, almost too strong to be put into general commodity wheat, and so he thought about discarding the variety. But when he had conversations with Daryl, he thought that there could be some value there, and so conversations started with Ardent Mills, which was ConAgra at the time. And long story short, they decided to keep the variety and utilize the special characteristics of the high quality of a variety like that in an identity preserved grain program. And so that program did come to life, and it's still alive today. We have released several varieties into that program over the years. The original Snowmass has been replaced with another variety that we now call Snowmass 2.0 that's very similar, but improved agronomics and yield and standability and some things over the original Snowmass. But there have also been other varieties put into that program over the years. There was a Clearfield variety back in the day called Thunder CL, a variety called Breck. We have a wheat stem soft light tolerant variety called Wyndham SF that's in the program now. We just released a new one this year called Telluride that will be in the program. So we're continually breeding for improved agronomic traits to put into that program as our breeding program at CSU continues to focus on that. Our growers in Colorado and also Southwest Nebraska, I would say, have enjoyed participating in that program over the years. It is an identity preserve program where they're required to store the grain separately. It's all hard white wheat. I probably should have mentioned that sooner. And it's milled through a special proprietary milling process that Ardent Mills has into a, I guess Ardent Mills could describe it better than me, but sort of an ultrafine flour where the whole grain is milled into a refined flour profile. And so, that's a product that millers and bakers can purchase to put into bread and bakery products to have the benefits of whole grain in a refined flour type of baking process. On the grower side, there is a premium program associated with growing those varieties and segregating it and delivering it to just the certain elevators that Ardent Mills participates with. But I believe we have 15 to 20 elevators every year. Those elevators can shift a little bit from year to year, but we've got many of those same receiving stations that have been in the program since the beginning. Farmers receive currently about a 20-cent base premium for growing the varieties, and then they can get extra premiums on top of that for hitting certain protein targets. So they can get up to, I think, currently a 70-cent premium for growing varieties and delivering them into the ultra grain program. So a 70-cent premium is a pretty big deal when wheat is $4.50 or $5 a bushel. It becomes a smaller amount if wheat were $10 a bushel. So sometimes that affects the acres that are in the program. But currently with wheat around $5.50, a 70-cent premium's pretty good value to the farmer. And I got distracted there. What else? Oh, I was going to say that we typically see about 100 to 150,000 acres in the program every year, and Colorado grows about 2 million acres of wheat, so you can do the math there. Some of those acres are in Nebraska because the Frenchman Valley Co-op system participates with Ardent Mills in receiving that grain. So it's not all just Colorado acres, but I typically say about 5% of our acres in Colorado are hard white wheat, and most of it is in the Ardent Mills Ultra Grain program. So that turns into about 4 million bushels to 6-7 million bushels, depending on yield levels of a given year. So that's kind of a summary.
So I'd like to defer to Justin. I don't have a particular trait. I would like to talk about something a little different after he makes his presentation.
Yeah. I think Ron's going to have kind of building on what Brad was talking about with hard white wheat and some of his experience that he's had in that realm. I don't want to belabor your question too long, but I think it's an important point to talk about trying to bring, whether it's a trait or variety, to the marketplace and looking at those past examples. I mean, I would say that I've seen multiple iterations of that come to the marketplace. Probably as early as when I was a college student. One of the things I did is I worked at the Russell County Co-op, and during the summers, and during the mid '90s. I know Brian Walker and others in the room remember this, but it was when we had a Carl variety, Carl 92 variety, that was identified by the marketplace as something that might have improved quality, that millers and bakers might see as value. And so I remember when I was 19 years old, at harvest time, farmers would come in, and at the elevator they would say if that variety that they were harvested and delivering was Carl variety or Carl 92 variety, or not. And if it was a Carl 92 variety, then at the co-op level it was dumped in a different bin and segregated, and farmers were given a 10-cent premium, which worked well for the first week of harvest. But then by the second week of harvest, every single truckload was Carl 92 coming into the into the elevator. And so that was an example of trying to find like an endpoint royalty to try to associate value in a somewhat of an uncontrolled manner that didn't last in continuous following years. The hard white wheat is probably, as the wheat industry looks at something, the examples that Brad gave. There's even a longer history with that, with going back to the Platt program, where Platt program through AgriPro was working with ConAgra and identified a variety that had a low PPO trait that they were using in, I believe, refrigerated doughs, but there's definitely others in the room there that know this better than I do. But that was a program that worked well for a while. At General Mills, again, it was traits that were associated around, hard white wheats that it was New West or New Hills, and identifying, trying to do a program incentivizing farmers to buy certified seed and then planting that seed and then delivering it to the elevator, and then getting a structured premium on top of local basis, depending on protein content, quality, that ran into problems, and it was because we were having issues with these independent programs that we actually, as an industry, we went to the federal government, if you remember, and we did a hard white wheat incentive program in 2003 that was a sunsetting program for a 3-year period, with the idea of, as an industry, this is a class, or this is a variety of something that we wanted to try to incentivize increased production of, for the betterment of our export demand and competitiveness, and something that was right for the industry. So I would say that is an example of working with government incentive plan that actually got hard white wheat acres up over that 3-year period in the state of Kansas, up to the highest point that it had reached at 450,000 acres at one time. And that program consisted of a per acre payment for planting with certified seed, and then a payment on per bushel that was harvested, delivered to the elevator. But again, that program expired, and the flaw that was with that program was that it didn't recognize the burden that the grain handler had in that system. It was strictly focused on, in my opinion, on incentivizing the grower to grow it, but then the burden that the grain handler or elevator was taking, and potentially having discounts with segregation issues or extra costs with segregation, wasn't being offset. And so it created a little bit of friction in the countryside and being able to get that to marketplace. And when it came time to see if they wanted to renew that program, the industry wasn't aligned in being able to go and put forth that effort. And so that hard white wheat incentive program went away. The best examples that we have, um, as far as like a trait to marketplace, aren't in IP programs like what Brad or some of those other examples we just gave, but maybe more like the example this group is kind of thinking about is when our breeders identify specific wheat streak mosaic resistance, or whether it's um, scab tolerance varieties that have that an increased advantage that has a genetic solution to a problem that farmers are facing. We've kind of gone just that public release route in trying to see make it as broadly accessible to farmers to try to access those problems through those genetics and see so they can see the benefits from the work that our breeding community has done. And that's kind of been more so the approach than where we may be kind of gravitating towards now is how do we try to have a more controlled system from genetics to seed to grower to handler to miller to finally the consumer to try to add some value. The most recent example that I would give is working with Graincraft on their preferred variety program. They were doing incentives for growers to grow specific varieties and that were regionally located to their flour mills that they would be drawing from. And over a course of time, from just looking at variety surveys, you can certainly see that program has had an impact on shifting uh, percentages of acres to those varieties that they had on their program that they were wanting to deliver to their customer, put into their flour for their customer. Again, that's more of a broad program that a company's done that we tried to work with them and promote. So those would be a few examples, and I'll turn it over to my boss Ron and let him talk.
It's amazing, Justin. Great minds think along the same lines, I think. Not that you and I are great minds, but you took part of my speech. So going back to what you said, can't run a business unless you have a customer. So the first go around with hard white wheat, we asked producers to produce the product. Well, they did. We didn't have a customer. So the producer was sitting there with bins of wheat and nowhere to go with them. Years passed, the government came out with a program. They paid the farmer, the producer, to do this. My opinion, they should have paid the commercial elevator or the big companies that amount of money and had them build their organization, get their producers. So that failed. So now we're looking at something different. I think if you have a good product and this fiber thing looks really good, I think if you sell that to the customer, then, that's the first step. You have to have a customer before you produce the product. So although hard white winter wheat has suffered setbacks, the potential is still there as a predominant whole grain product. Whole grain products have taken on a new, different life, as will hard white wheat. Once the public becomes more educated about these potential health advantages, the entire wheat industry will no doubt respond in a more positive way. I've been promoting hard white wheat for 30 years, and as I mentioned earlier, stay as a wheat commissioner to help promote that product, and I guess I'm hard-headed enough to just stay with it. I think we can do it.
All right. Thank you. Thinking of some of the examples that you've just shared where we've had maybe single varieties that were promoted for a certain aspect to a whole market class of wheat to a more controlled program like ultra grain or a less controlled but strongly recommended program like the Graincraft's preferred variety list. How do you think that, as we're thinking about deploying higher fiber wheats, when we may not have a variety that is adapted to all the regions, and I should say for those online that this panel really is representing the hard winter wheat region. Are from Montana all the way down to Texas region, and so that's kind of what is populating some of these views here. But thinking about if we were to deploy high fiber wheat in this region, based on your experience, what kind of program should we maybe be targeting, making the assumption that we have that customer? I'll just put that in there, that if we have the customer, what kind of program would be most helpful to farmers, most deployable? I guess, what are your opinions on that?
Well, I'll share my opinion. So I've got just a little bit of experience in looking at what farmers will grow, and they're going to grow whatever makes them the most money. It's really just as simple as that. Farmers get to choose what to plant on their land, if they want to plant wheat or corn or millet or milo or soybeans or sunflowers, and you know, the list just kind of keeps going. And so when we're trying to get growers to plant anything that's in the wheat space, it ultimately comes down to what are they going to make the most money planting and selling. And so if, you know, in the case of the ultra grain program, it's driven by whatever acreage we're able to achieve in it. It's driven by the premium that's in the contract and the yield of the varieties that are in the program. You know, our other experience with coaxium wheat, it's if they have enough weed problems, it's going to pay to plant coaxium wheat. And in the case of wheat stem soft fly varieties, it's what's going to keep my wheat standing so that I can have something to deliver to the elevator. It's whatever's going to make the most money. So I think that's the challenge for any specialty program, is having the advantage in that grower choice element, because he's got a lot of choices, not just within wheat, but other crops. We're competing against all the other crops too. So to get the grower to plant, pick your program, whatever you might plug into that space, there's got to be a value to the grower at the end of the day and what he's going to sell. So it's economics to me.
I think you're correct about the value, but I think the big problem with having more choices, we don't really have the infrastructure in this country to handle that kind of thing. Like in Kansas, we do need a lot more farm storage. Of course, it depends on how big a program you have as to whether you can entice an elevator to take on storing that product for you. But then you look at handling that product and keeping it identity preserved. We've got a ways to go to get that done.
I guess, I think everybody in the room probably agrees with Ron and Brad and their comments. And, you know, of course, you know, you have to have that demand pull through to make it work, in that conduit to get it to marketplace. The wheat channel, the wheat marketing chain is so unique. It does touch so many different places. Farmers aren't growing food. You know, they're growing wheat that then becomes food that takes the value chain to turn it into food for the customer to deliver that higher value product. And so you know, the best way to do it probably is, you know, working with our milling partners that, you know, can help facilitate that logistics and that chain to get it delivered to the marketplace, or one of their customers develop that then millers compete to deliver into it, would be the best way to have it on that end of the marketing chain to pull it through. And if you wanted to look at, you know, we don't grow a lot of organic wheat in the Southern Plains, but If you look at why organic wheat works or how it works because you have you have a customer base that's demanding it, a processor and miller that is dedicated to sourcing it and processing it and delivering it, and then working with a network of growers that are growing it, whether to meet the specifications that hit the qualifications of organic wheat to go into that system. And so that it may be a small portion of the whole U.S. value chain, but that's what's happening on the organic side uh, is an example of how value is passed along and delivered through the marketing chain.
All right, thank you. I do want to open it up to questions either online or from the room. This could be to the whole panel or to a specific member of the panel. I do have more questions, but I'd like to give others the opportunity to ask their burning questions. I got Jane here.
Hi, this is Jane DeMarchi from the Millers. I think it's on. Ron, this question is for you. You have experience in creating with Farmer Direct Foods, a system where the product itself, the connection to the grower, created its own value. And so I'm just wondering if that could be expanded upon in the context of the high fiber wheat, where it's actually the product is in part that you know who the grower is.
You're correct. We grow hard white wheat for Farm Direct Foods, and then in turn that's milled and sold to King Arthur Flour. So they're able to trace back to my field, to my bin, where this wheat came from. They're not specific enough yet to go directly to where at on this field, but they can do that. The problem is when you start doing that, there's really not enough profit built into handling all of this. There are a lot of stages you go through. Now, if you talk to an elevator, for example, they've got to charge each time they touch that kernel. And for some reason, industry is not allowing the farmer that kind of refund or monetary gain. There are too many variables, even, not only in just farming, but in handling this grain, putting it in a bin, IPing it, taking care of the bugs, keep, getting it cool, handling it again, putting it on a truck. And then once you think you have something settled, if you haven't worked out a price on transportation, fuel prices go up, costs more to haul your product to the mill. And so there's really never, in my opinion, enough money built in to do that for the farmer. So what the farmer does, he just said, I'm not going to take that chance. I don't want that headache. If something goes wrong and I IP it back to my bin, I may be in trouble. So they just grow the commodity. When I get a chance to talk to young farmers, I keep emphasizing to them that we need to get away from the commodity production and grow an ingredient, calling wheat an ingredient. We need to separate ourselves from the regular elevator price. And the reason I say that, I don't know that we're setting the price on hard red winter wheat here in Kansas. Someone mentioned earlier that we're probably getting a lot of competition out of the Black Sea area. In my opinion, that's where the price is set. And then it translates back into this country. And of course, the millers like that, because it most of the time keeps the price down. You can grow wheat anywhere in the world, and that's where the pricing comes in. It's not just here. So if you have a specific product that you're creating and you build that price in and no one else has that, you may have a chance of making a go of it.
I like that, ingredient, not commodity. I think that's something we should, as breeders, even think about, that we are breeding ingredients. Were there questions online? Other questions in the room? All right. Dr. Mary.
Thank you. This is tourist Mary. I spent 18 years in Southeast Idaho, and during that time there, I think you'd agree, we saw a tremendous increase in on-farm storage capacity among the producers in the state, partly because they were handling multiple market classes on farm and having to deal with that. Then we moved to Ohio, and there was almost no on-farm storage. In Kansas, it's a different story, but there's still just not a lot out there when I drive around the state. Are there things we ought to be looking to do to incentivize putting bins up and helping growers get that flexibility with how they handle and market their crops?
I don't know. I don't know about government programs. It seems each time that I've tried to get involved with one of those, it's been a flop. And in fact, I got to the point one time on putting up a bin structure. We were just to the point where we were going to put it up and the government was going to finance it. And then I thought about it, you know, I really don't want them in my business. There are too many ridiculous steps that I have to go through and guidelines I have to adhere to. For example, you fill the bin up and it's got a peak, okay? And if you want to take a loan out on it, this may have changed. I don't know. I haven't tried it lately, but take a loan out on it, you can't have a peak in that bin. You have to level it off. So, you know, just things like that, I think there are programs out there. They're not cheap. I think in Kansas, the reason you don't see a lot of grain bins out there, especially for wheat, it's hard to handle and store wheat in a climate like we have. If you can't cool that wheat down, then you'll have problems the whole year. And if you get bugs in the wheat, then you just haul it away and hope that someone will take it. And that's not a good deal. There is an answer to that. There is a company out there that they sell portable air conditioning for these grain bins that you can cool your wheat down. If you handle it correctly and watch your nighttime temperatures and all of that, we do handle a lot of wheat and we do take care of those things pretty well. Once in a while, if you don't watch it, you can have a problem, but most of the time we can handle it. It just takes a lot of care and a lot of farmers don't want to do that. As far as fall crops, that's a lot easier. Temperature's cooler. If you can keep the moisture down, you're okay.
Thank you, panelists. All your successful story, almost 100% about the end user quality. Before never happened for the health benefit or health functional, the wheat there. So now we have the new government. I know lots of even my friend Sean lost his job, but now MAHA, Make America Health Again. So they quoted MAHA is unstoppable. So do you guys feel maybe now is an opportunity? We can succeed on the health benefit or functionality. If you look at because this is the CGF, Coalition of the Green Fiber, the negative side of the news is whole wheat flour. If you look at the past decades, 2015, 10 years ago, is the highest, the production, only 5.7%. 2024, slightly higher than 2023, but only 4.3%. So really didn't move any needle. Why is that? I don't believe not only because the whole wheat flour foods not taste good. Consumers still willing to spend, even the insurance not cover, $1,200 per month for the Ozempic or GLP-1 because they see the effect. We know that the food, the dietary, short-term, you didn't see the effect. So what's the panel's sense of that? Would we have a new opportunity or just temporary things? Because the new health secretary, Robert Kennedy, you see, is make the MAHA very, very hot now.
So I don't really like everything the man center does. but I would like to be on his committee.
I agree with you. I mean, I would think it could be an opportunity for whole wheat to make a comeback. Because you're more of an expert in it than me, but I think there's a lot of health benefits to whole wheat. And we have some products that can taste really good with whole wheat. And it's sitting right there waiting for us to make health gains. But maybe we just need better consumer education or something, or more transparency around some of that.
I think we should try to make the loaf of bread cheaper. You know, I see a family of so many kids, you know, they can't afford to buy these $4 loaves of bread that are hard, they're whole wheat. If there's some way to do that cheaper, I think they would.
I would chime in quick that I would second the idea of putting Ron on a committee with RFK Jr. So that would, but I do think it's important to bring up when I think we're all kind of digesting this new environment that we're in and trying to see how we navigate what is coming here in the near term and how our industry reacts and how we make sure that ag and our food industry can stay together with our collaborations and in partnership and a consistent message on this. But as you go down this path of some of what is coming out of the MAHA movement, I do think this group also needs to be conscious of it because when thinking about when we want to talk about something that's new and better or improved or healthier, we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that we're not demonizing what we currently have. There's been a lot of work through the Wheat Foods Council and their wheat organizations, our breeding community, and our milling partners and baking partners. We've through whether it's fortified flour or through what promotion of whole grains. There's a lot of health benefits with the wheat story we have now, and we need to make sure that as we take a next step or take on that next challenge or that next messaging that we're trying to communicate, that we make sure that we're doing it in a way that we're building on something to improve it and to make it better and making sure that we're not pushing down what we currently have that really isn't a terrible story that we already have in place. I think I think Ron can carry that when he's on the MAHA committee as well and try to defend that. But I do think specifically to what we're talking about here and the work that we're talking about, as we find new innovation that's going to be improvements or have a health attention to it for consumers, that we bring that to the market or we discuss that to the market and to consumers in a way that we're not kind of shooting ourselves in the foot with a good story that we already have in this industry.
All right. Thank you very much. If you could all join me in a round of applause for our first set of panelists.